Okay, this is review for test number 4. Let's start with the lab. At this point, we're going to do the labs on chapter 7, 8, and 12. Since you haven't turned 13 and 14, well, 13 and 14 because of what I discussed in lecture questions that are the same as the objectives in the lab could be on there. So let's take a quick look at this. Chapter 7, Chapter 8, you're going to need to know about muscles, muscle contraction. Let me see what else we've got here. You need to know what a reflex arc is, why it works. You need to know, you could be questioned on what the Babinski reflex is and what it tests for, the difference between alpha and beta motor neurons and what they do. In Chapter 8, you're going to be looking at muscle structure and again, reflex arcs and that. You're also, Chapter 12, you're going to look at the heart, the EKG of the heart, know what the different waves are, know the blood flow through the heart, know the structure in that, what valves are where, bicuspid, tricuspid, semilunar, pulmonary, know the pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, where it goes, what's in it, what parts of the heart it comes off of, and know the pattern of blood flow through the heart, and also the pattern of the electrical pattern of the heart, i.e. starting at the SA node, going down through the AV node, through the bundle of His, the bundle branches, and finally the Purkinje fibers in the ventricles. Know what blood pressure is. Know when you're measuring blood pressure, what are you hearing? And what does systolic stand for? What does the diastolic stand for? What part of that blood pressure is that? Review how to take a blood pressure. You're going to have to know questions on hemoglobin, what it is, how it carries blood, what happens in the lungs, what happens in the tissue, what happens with the blood, with the CO2, how is it transported, how is it exchanged, how is it carried, what's the major components. In blood, what's the major component? Formed elements. You could be questioned on the formed elements in the blood, and the chemical reactions, i.e., the conversion of CO2 to carbonic acid and or carbonic acid to CO2, and how that works with the exchange. And so your questions will all be questions that are either in the lab, or if you review the lab objectives at the beginning of each lab, the questions would all be covered within the lab objectives. Okay, that's the lab part of the exam. So you'll have questions on 7, 8, 12, and on 13 and 14, look at the objectives, but this would be stuff that we have already covered in the lecture that might be related to the lab that we did. So I'm not looking at the questions at the end of 13 or 14, but it would be stuff in the objectives that we have already covered as part of the lecture. Okay, let's keep going here. I'm just looking for the time. Chapter 12. we're going to be tested on this test. We're going to be tested on chapters 12, 13, 14, and 16. 12 is skeletal muscles and muscular actions. Let's see, the exact title is Muscles, Mechanisms, and Control. Going to need to know about the motor units. What is the structure of the muscle down to the myofibrils and the filaments. You need to know about you could be tested on the wrappings, the endophysium, myophysium, paraphysiums. But again, muscular fibers, you're going to have to know how they're set up, how they're bundled, the structure of that. You need to know the neurons that come in, what happens, what's at the junction, the motor plate type, what type of effect, say, botulism or Botox might have on a muscle. We could be looking at somatic motor neurons versus the autonomic. You look at mechanisms of contraction, the myosin, the actin, the sliding filament theory. What's the unit of the muscle? From Z to Z band, is it sarcomere? Looking at the sliding filament theory, how does that work? What's overlapping? What's the chemical reaction required? The calcium, the troponin, those type of chemicals. You need to have an idea of how those work and how those aid in the contraction. You know what a cross bridge is? And why you'd have a cross bridge, how that works with muscle contraction, how the muscle contractions are regulated, the calcium effect in the muscle, calcium release channels in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Know what the sarcoplasmic reticulum is versus, say, the endoplasmic reticulum. Muscle relaxation. There may be questions on the antagonistic use of muscles. Because muscles cannot push, they can only contract. Twitch, tetanus, summation. How do you recruit more muscles? TREP. Types of contraction. Isotonic, isometric. Those types. You could be questioned on what if you have muscles that are contracting but not moving. An isometric or isotonic type contraction. Energy, where are the muscles going to get their energy from? Know the relationship between the length of the muscle and the contractility, i.e., muscle, if it's overstretched and the fibers are not overlapping, may not be able to contract at all. Metabolism, know what the muscles use for fuel. I'm not going to go into individual muscles, but just in general. Know what an oxygen debt is. Know about the phosphocreatine reactions in getting muscle energy. Know what happens in muscle damage and repair, the type of cells that help repair muscle or generate new muscle. Know what muscles can be generated. Know how they adapt in exercise. Golgi tendons. Know what a muscle spindle is. Know what the alpha motor neurons are doing. And alpha and gamma, motor neurons. And know about stretch reflexes, Golgi tendons. Heart muscle, know what gap junctions are, know how troponin works in the heart muscles. Again, know how calcium's involved in heart muscle contraction. Know what calmodulin is. It could be on the question as part of the calcium channel. Know what a calcium blocker channel is, channel blocker, and why you might use that. Smooth muscles, know about single unit and multi-unit muscles, autonomic innervation of smooth muscles, why we would have that. It pretty much covers the muscle end of it. Where am I? I still have another 5 minutes. Okay. Chapter 13. Let's see. Let's look at the summary on 12 real quick. Know what attaches muscles. Know about the attachment of muscles to each other and to bones and that. Structure of the myofibrils, structure of the muscles, cross bridges. Know how an action potential is moved through a muscle. Know about twitch responses and graded reactions, and why you can grade them, and what is recruitment. Energy supply for the muscles, where it comes from, how it's stored. Know how they contract. Know the muscle parts, sarcomere, myofibrils, fibrils. If you review the questions at the end of the chapter of 12, they will be fairly close to what you're going to see on the test. Okay. 13. Circulatory system. Know the types of circulatory systems. Know what the circulatory system function is. Transportation, regulation, protection. There could be some questions in there about that. Know what the components are. Heart, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes. Know the composition of the blood, i.e. plasma, serum, and what the formed elements are. And generally what they do. Erythrocytes, white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, plasma. Know what hemoglobin does. Also know what albumin does. Know about the recovery of tissue or interstitial fluid. Know what organs are responsible for leukopoiesis or erythropoiesis, the formation of white cells and red cells. I am not going to ask you the stages of leukopoiesis or erythropoiesis, or where just know they're coming from the stem cells. Know about the chemical regulators, i.e. erythropoietin, kidney. Know what the ABO system represents and the RH system represents. Know about the antibodies that are attached to the red cells, and what you might see in a reaction if you give somebody the wrong type of blood. RH, know about the RH factors, also know about hemolytic disease in the newborn. If you have a baby that's whose mother is an RH positive, baby's RH negative, and how those antibodies might be formed. Know how have an idea of the intrinsic or extrinsic coagulation pathways, what aspirin might do to interfere with it, the basis of coagulation, i.e. the platelet plug, what the platelets release for tissue damage, platelet plug, and what platelets release for aggregation of other platelets. Know what the intrinsic and extrinsic pathways are, know what an anticoagulant is, and for citrate, EDTA, and heparin, have an idea of how they work. Okay, this is part 1 of review for chapters 12, 13, 14, and 16. The next, I'm running out of time here, so I'll start it again. We are up to the heart, structure of the heart and heart sounds.